My name is Daniel Blinick. I'm a software engineer at Immunai, and I'm just going to be speaking about how we came to Dagster and how we make use of it as much as possible in our pipeline. So just a little bit about me. So I actually started in web development. I joined Immunai about 3 years ago when it was 6 months old. I was doing web there for most of my time actually. And then only about 9 months ago, I really got into data engineering and pipeline. So, already from my very beginning in this field, I've been with Dagster. I think it's made the transition a really good one. So a little bit about Immunai. We are a therapeutics company that is trying to develop drugs that help the immune system fight infection. And in order to do that, we need a very comprehensive understanding of how the immune system works and what's really going on there. And there are many approaches to take in order to achieve that. And the one that we've chosen is to do genomic sequencing. And essentially what that does is it attempts to measure the activity of genes within cells. So just to make that a little bit more concrete, most people have heard of DNA sequencing. You take a saliva sample, you send it to a lab, and you understand more about your DNA. But in every cell in your body, the DNA is essentially the same. And what differentiates cells from each other is which part of that blueprint is used in the different cells. And so when we can delve into that, we get a picture of what's going on in your immune system. And that's really what we're trying to do. So the challenge for me as an engineer and our engineering team is essentially converting that biological data that we get from our lab into digital data, and then transforming it, enriching it in order for our computational biologists and our data analysts downstream of the pipeline to do analysis, AI, machine learning, and bring insight into how we can better develop drugs. So just to, again, make this a little bit more concrete, I wanted to present one of the main data structures we work with, which is the cell gene matrix. And as I was trying to explain before, this matrix is essentially made up of columns, which are cells, and then the rows are genes. And the values are how prevalent that gene is expressed within the cell. And so different types of cells will have different gene signatures. And by doing that, we can understand what's going on in the immune system. For example, one patient might have a higher prevalence of T cells as opposed to B cells. And that tells us something. That tells us when we know that that patient responded to a treatment, we know that alignment of signatures might be playing a role. And these matrices get really, really, big in size. They get to about 5 billion data points when we're talking about across a project. And that's one of the challenges that we deal with, scaling that. So analysts can work with those data sets in a very efficient manner. And so just to give an overview of what our pipeline looks like, essentially the steps themselves, the business logic is written by computational biologists. And us on the data engineering team, we're really responsible just for the orchestration logic of what gets run when. And we try not to concern ourselves with the actual business logic itself. So initially, when the company was about a year old, we developed a homegrown solution. And what that gave us was a lot of flexibility. It was written in Python, and the people who wrote it did a great job. Again, the company was so new that we just didn't really know exactly where we wanted the flexibility. And so the solution did give us a lot of that. And it worked. It was written, it worked, and it served us well for a while. But as time went on, we started to have issues with it, and just natural as a company grows. And so the three main things that really kept coming up were, one is that we didn't have a dev environment. Creating that kind of environment obviously takes a lot of resources, and we just didn't have that. And because the computational biologists were the ones changing the business logic, they had no dev environment. They couldn't test things really until it hit production. And so the development cycle was very brittle. We also didn't have a UI. We had something very hacked together, but it wasn't very usable. The flexibility that served us well in the beginning, as the orchestration logic got more and more complex, it just got very unwieldy. And we ended up in a situation where there wasn't a lot of transparency. Only one person really knew what was going on within the code. And it just became very unworkable as the company grew. So this is essentially what it looks like now. When we started exploring, I was tasked with doing a little bit of research into the different frameworks, and we kind of boiled it down to, the main player, Airflow, which is, that's what everyone's heard of, even if you're not a data engineer. I actually didn't find Dagster. One of my colleagues did, and so we really boiled it down to these two. Are we going to go with like the name that everyone knows, or are we going to take a risk on a smaller project, which definitely felt like it suited us better? And we ended up obviously going with Dagster for these 5 reasons, which I'll delve a little bit into. So firstly, the abstractions in Dagster just seem to be very well thought through. When we were doing the analysis, it was just around the time when Dagster switched from pipelines and solids and composite solids to graphs and ops, and just even just that, switching to the graphs, which are you can have as many graphs within graphs, and there's no difference between a subgraph and a graph. Just the thought behind that really appealed to us. The other thing we really liked was the data-centric pipeline model. Seeing the pipeline as a flow of data really just made a lot of sense to us, and it's much more intuitive than the Airflow model. And what I've taken the screenshot here is the being able to run from a point in the graph, which really revolves around the fact that the pipeline is centered around data. And we've used that countless times, so it's really served us well. This feature also, this is something that's our pipeline makes use of, this dynamic mapping feature, which not all pipelines have, which orchestration platforms have, which is the ability to kind of define the graph at runtime based on certain metadata. So yeah, this simplified how many different jobs we needed to use. And again, like we really like this feature. The asset materializations, truthfully, we haven't actually utilized this as much as we should, and we're really excited about the new developments in the asset space. But really, even just the idea of kind of like declaring the assets that have been created and being able to track it and link it back to the run very, very easily makes debugging things easier. And again, just like that thought behind it was really attracted us as well. I didn't even add this here, but I guess this is kind of a meta point for all the slides that came before it, but Dagit was just, in our minds, so much better than the Airflow UI and a lot of the other UIs we saw. It's just very simple. There aren't that many bells and whistles, which in my mind is a feature. It's very like straightforward. You don't really have to guess about what you're doing. So that's kind of like the reason we chose it. And but obviously we ended up finding so many more things that really made us happy and continue to make us happy. So I just want to talk a little bit about those and how we use them. So the first one, which should have been obvious to me, but not being a data engineer, I guess I didn't realize how painful this would have been without resources. But just the ability to use resources to set up different environments, have a test environment very easily, a dev environment very easily, and not change the business logic has been amazing. It really just takes away so much of the magic in the sense that you know exactly what you're doing in a test environment. You don't have to rely on frameworks that are filling in all these gaps for you. You're feeding it the resources yourself. And yeah, it just made things so much easier to work with. Custom IO managers, we've also made use of. This is one of our IO managers that basically just extends the in-memory IO manager, but in addition, it just dumps the content into a bucket. And we have a few others like this. And again, just added flexibility is great. The different sensors we've made use of, we make use of the failure success sensors, obviously the standard sensors to kick off jobs. And we, at one point, we're making use of an asset materialization sensor. Yeah, it's just a wealth of things to choose from to do what you want. Just makes everything, the code a lot simpler and more obvious in terms of what you're trying to do. The GraphQL API is something new that we've just been exploring. We're using it to what we call like nuking our jobs that went wrong. Sometimes we have jobs that run with the wrong metadata. And so we use it to kind of query the runs. This is still in development, and then just get rid of them. And then the sensor kicks them off again with the updated metadata. And actually, as an added bonus, this has been my introduction to GraphQL, and you know, I've just come to use it in all sorts of other places as a bonus. So I just want to share one debate that we had on our team. This was earlier on, just to share it with you guys, and maybe it'll spark some interesting conversation. So our pipeline relies on a bunch of metadata, and we really weren't sure what to do with that metadata, whether to hold it in an external database and query it in during the pipeline run, or to embed it within the run configuration. And so the pro of putting in the run configuration is that it's explicit. We also take the run configuration, and when we create assets, we store the run configuration as provenance for that data set. And so anything we put in the run configuration is implicitly stored or explicitly stored as provenance, so storing the metadata in the run config gave us that ability also. More importantly, the metadata can't change mid-run. And that's what something we were nervous about. The cons are obviously that it makes running from the launchpad almost impossible, because you need to then like copy and paste this massive file. It just wouldn't really have been workable. And the provenance that's created on the data set is much harder to read, because it just gets really big. And so the compromise we came to is we basically created, we took the files out of the run config, we stored them as files in Google Cloud Storage that are versioned. And so we just put the version number into the run. And what that guarantees is that it doesn't change mid-run. If it does, then it's just a different version of the file. And again, we can run it from the launchpad. It doesn't bloat the run configuration. And that's it. Thank you.